And hi again, everybody. Welcome back to Sports Talk. Doug Miles, Don Henderson with you on another Monday night. Great weekend of sports and lots going on to talk about. And Don, how are you? You probably spent a lot of time in front of the set like I did.
Boy, I'll tell you, it was a great weekend. A national championship-type football game on Saturday. And then, boy, oh boy, what a Sunday the National Football League had. The Giants coming back and just big wins. And a lot to talk about, but we've got a special guest at the top of the show. And Pat Williams, I've known for a long period of time. And, Pat, you're writing more books, I think, than Andy Rooney here. What's going on?
Well, Don, it's nice to hear from both of you. This latest book I've written has really been a labor of love. I've always been a great admirer of Bobby Bowden as a coach and a person. Last year I wrote a book for a publisher called Bear Bryant on leadership, and they were happy with it and said, who's next? Who do you do next? And I said, well, I really want to do Bobby Bowden on leadership. And so for the last 8-9 months, Don, I've been immersed in researching and trying to track down as many people as I could, and it ended up about 350 that I talked to get a little soundbite or an insight into what made Bobby Bowden a great leader. And so that's the meat of the book, which has just come out.
Well, I know at the end of his career, and even during his career, with a great record he has as a football coach, but he was also a motivational speaker, a lot like Lou Holtz. He went all around the country in motivational forces, and so I think he really had a great topic to work with.
Well, there's no question, Don. He's doing that now full time. He's out speaking across America in not just churches and youth groups, but to the corporate world. He's got a wonderful message, and he's got that down-home Alabama way of using it, with all his Bobby Bowdenisms, like that dadgum guy. I mean, never curses. It's always dadgum. But he's a marvelous speaker, and anybody who needs a speaker at any kind of event, boy, I'd book Bobby Bowden in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I saw Bobby a few years ago. Pat down here in Sarasota, local church, had him as a preacher for the Sunday, and he did a great job. I mean, it wasn't just football talk. I mean, he did an actual sermon with biblical references and everything. He did a great job with that.
Yeah, he can preach from the Bible. He can talk to your athletic youth group. He is terrific in the corporate world. He's got a lot of gifts, and he has turned out some wonderful books. But the difference with the book that we have done here, Bobby couldn't call all of his former West Virginia players or his Florida State players and said, what made me a great leader, or what was my greatest strength as a leader. Yeah, he couldn't write that kind of book. So I could, and through the help of the West Virginia media people, the Florida State media people, they helped me find so many of these former players, and with phone numbers. Without that help, I never could have done the book. And I tracked down a whole bunch of them, and it ended up close to 350 interviews that we did.
Well, I'll tell you, Pat, and maybe you give us a little background on a couple of the players or some of the people that really struck you with their sincerity at West Virginia, because I can remember it was quite a surprise when he finally got down here to Florida, left West Virginia, and then what a great career he had here. But how about a couple of the stories that really hit you, people that had a personal contact with him?
Well, Don, let me just say this. Whether you spoke to the team he coached in South Georgia when he was still maybe he had turned 30. You get to his Samford University team in Alabama, go get the West Virginia guys in the 70s, and then the Florida State guys in the 80s, the 90s, into the 21st century. Here's what really hit me. There was a consistency to all the stories. Bobby Bowden never changed over 50 years of coaching. So you got the same stories. He cared about me as an individual. He came into my house to recruit me, and my parents fell in love with him. He never lied to me. I mean, whatever he told me when he recruited me, he lived that through when I got to the campus. He was a teacher of life. I heard that a lot.
Right.
He was not just a football coach, but he was preparing us for life. And now, by the way, these older guys say, yeah, now we get it. Now we understand what he was doing. So it comes back down to this word called integrity. His walk and his talk matched. There was no inconsistency with what he was talking about and what he was living. And he was very consistent in his faith. He would take his teams to church a couple of times in the fall, always to a black-oriented church and then a white-oriented church. And he told the kids' parents in advance he was going to do that. Once he got in the kitchen with Mama, he was going to probably get that player. He was not. He pretty well had it done once he got in the kitchen to eat Mama's chocolate pie that night that she'd been preparing all day for him. Great stuff. Great stuff.
That is great. Doug?
Yeah, I know you just mentioned the players loved him. Just reading in the book, you talk about how Deion Sanders really felt a great affinity to Bobby Bowden when he was at FSU.
Yes, we finally got Deion towards the end of the research here, and we were thrilled about that. One of the other things that happened towards the end of the book, we emailed all the media relations guys within NFL teams who had Florida State players playing for them, and asked if they would just go on my behalf, because I couldn't get to those guys.
Right.
And just asked if they could go to those guys after practice and just shoot me back, you know, what made Bobby Bowden a good leader? What did you learn about Bobby? Do you have a memory of him as a leader? And boy, we got, and we got them all in the book. I mean, we got almost every one of the Florida State players who are currently in the NFL. Those media guys with the NFL were awesome, and we were really happy we could get those stories in.
And I would have thought that they probably got a little bit from Ward as well, because he was not only a great leader on the football field, but then a great leader in the National Basketball Association with the Knicks and so forth. So everybody, all they talked about was his leadership. So I'd imagine he would have had some very nice things to say about him.
Yeah, he did, and I was glad we got him. He's coaching high school football down in Houston, and I was able to get him before the fall season started for them, and had a wonderful chat. He's a very low-key guy. You know, he's not a very dynamic speaker, but very straightforward and a solid guy, and he was terrific to talk to. And I got a nice sound bite from Charlie Ward, and I'm happy that's in the book. We got almost all of his old quarterbacks. We got Christian Ponder, and we got Wenke, and and Charlie Ward, and I think we got just about all of his quarterbacks. So that was good.
Talk a little bit about Pat. We had you on a few months ago talking about the great John Wooden and his leadership insights, what he built his whole life around and gave to his players. Coach Bowden has very similar. It's not the pyramid, I guess, but you could almost put it in that pyramid that John Wooden had, right?
Yeah, I think so. I've written 2 books about John Wooden, and now the Bowden book. I did the Bryant book. By the way, the next one we're going to do next year is Tom Osborne at Nebraska.
Great.
He's given me his blessing, and I'm real pleased about that. But at the end of the day, there is a similarity between those 3 coaches, Wooden, Bryant, and Bowden. They all had different personalities, but at the end of the day, they were teachers, not coaches. You know, they didn't talk a whole lot about coaching. It was always teaching.
Right.
And I've noticed that Vince Lombardi years ago said they call it coaching, but it's really teaching. So I think that's probably the cardinal principle. If you want to be an outstanding coach, you better look upon yourself as a teacher first. That's certainly what those coaches did. And again, and it's not, you're not just coaching X's and O's. More than anything, you're teaching and coaching life and getting these young athletes ready for a life long after their sports careers are over.
And obviously a great transition between the time you come out of college until you make that jump into college, and then come out of high school, make that jump into college, and that transition in life. But I would think also, although this is not a good time to talk about Penn State, but I would think Joe Pa would certainly fill in as one of your real leaders as well.
Well, Don, he's on that list. You know, I just keep waiting for him to retire. You know, it would help if you write these books about coaches who are no longer coaching. And here's Joe Pa in his mid-80s, sitting with an 8-1 record.
Right.
And they've got an interesting schedule. They got Nebraska coming to Penn State, and then Ohio State and Wisconsin. I mean, they got a brutal finish here. But if he's good, and he's playing. Their club's playing well, and those teams are beatable. They're beatable. It's going to be very interesting to see the end of the season here, and above all, how this horrible mess up in Penn State. How it's going to affect the end of the season here. It's such a sad story.
Yeah, the AP wrote a lot about it today, and of course everyone knows this is the end of Joe's contract, and that also administratively Penn State Joe is 100% cleared of any knowledge of anything going on, but the athletic director and the administrators are not. And I agree with you. I just think that this may be the crowning blow, and Joe may. He was injured, as you know, during the early part
It's going to be interesting, Don. He's one of the most unusual athletic people we've ever had in our country, and
Right.
He has not lost his zeal for coaching. Just like Bobby Bowden would go back to coach tonight if somebody offered him a job. I remember that famous quote. He finished in the Gator Bowl and won the game, and he's through at age 80. And Ann Bowden, his wife, said, "Honey, it's time for us to go home." and then Bobby said to the media, "I was ready to sign another 5-year contract." He said, "That's how good I feel." He said, "But we didn't win." He said, "But we didn't win enough games." He said, "We just didn't win enough dadgum games," said Bobby.
And let's face it, that's what it's all about. Well, the funny thing is, Pat, maybe you touch on this because you've touched with so many, and I know that there was so much made of Jeter last year signing this new long-term contract with the Yankees, and was he finished? But you've been through so many pro as well as college athletes that are coming to the end, as Joe Pa coming to the end, and coaches. It's a tough transition, isn't it? It's really almost impossible to describe how they feel and how they go through it.
And Don, it's different with everybody. At 65, John Wooden knew it was time to leave.
Right.
At age 65. Dean Smith was maybe 66, 67. Maybe somewhere in there, mid-60s,
right.
and that was enough for him, and he just walked away. You've got Urban Meyer, who's in his 40s and just couldn't go anymore.
Well, they're saying he's one of the people that the Penn State is talking to, so maybe he's going to go back and coach again. I don't know.
Well, and that who knows? Because if that's your personality, Don, you can't change it.
You're right.
Can't change who you are. But
and you know what happened with the St. Louis Cardinals? He just decided that at 67 it was time to walk away. He won a world championship, and quite an article in the paper today how he and the general manager and owner sat down, and he just said, this is it. I'm finished. I'm not going to come back. You can't talk me into it. I'm going to walk away right now.
And could have signed a new 3-year deal and enormous dollars.
Absolutely.
And Don, he is right on the neck. I mean, it would by the halfway marker before he'd catch John McGraw and go from third to second. And I love that quote. He said, "I know about the history of baseball." He said, "But that's not why I manage." He'd never catch Connie Mack. Unless he managed another 25 years.
No one's ever going to match Connie Mack.
But Don, at 88, Connie Mack, in 1950, I was 10 years old. I saw the last game he managed. The day it was the same day the Phillies beat the Dodgers in Ebbets Field to win the National League pennant. Right. Connie Mack, as I've read later, he was forced out by his sons at 88. He had no desire to leave.
Well, as you said, wow. Some people just, Joe Pa's one of those ones that, and Bowden is another, as you indicated, that would go on and on. If they had a contract, they'd keep coaching.
No question. So if Penn State wants to hire a coach, Bobby Bowden's available. He's available. But this book has been a delight, and it's available now. I just send people, Doug, up to Amazon.com.
Right.
The book is called Bobby Bowden on Leadership. Advantage Media Group is the publisher, and it's written. It's not a sports book, really. It's written for leaders in every field: business, politics, the church, education. It's got application to everybody in a leadership role. So much to learn from the great Bobby Bowden.
Yeah, I read through it over the weekend, Pat, and it's an inspirational type of book. You really feel that you're listening to Bobby talk to you in the way that you wrote the anecdotes. Great job.
That's right.
Pat, we'd be remiss if we didn't ask you a little basketball question here, being with the Orlando Magic and all. Your thoughts, and is that deal going to get done on Wednesday? The owners have put it out on the table for the players.
Well, Doug, as we know, Mickey Harrison was fined $500,000 last week.
Don has that kind of money.
Yeah, and so do I. Michael Jordan was whacked for $100,000, and Mrs. Williams has told me very, very distinctly that she is writing no checks to the NBA, and we're all following things closely.
Fair enough.
Someday soon to talk about basketball. It's going to happen one of these days.
Oh, it'll happen, no question about it. And but I will say this: that David Stern has certainly been very forthright, at least over the weekend and the latest since they had that last 8-hour meeting, in putting down the gauntlet. I mean, he's really putting the pressure on everybody right now to make a move one way or the other without getting into any of the details or talking about it. The commissioner has certainly stepped up all of a sudden and is trying to put a lot of pressure on everybody.
One of these days, Don, I want to write a book called David Stern on leadership. I think he's one of the most unique leaders we've ever seen in the history of sports.
Right.
And that's a book I'd love to take on someday.
Well, Pat, we really appreciate.
Down here for a minute.
Go ahead, Don.
Go ahead, Doug.
No, I'm just going to thank Pat, but go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Don.
No, I just got to say, over his long run, here in Florida, and again, just as Joe Pobb, the only difference between he and Joe Paterno is that, as you just indicated a few minutes ago, Joe's still in the hunt. He's leading the Big Ten right now at 5-0, going into this difficult part of the schedule. At the tail end of Bobby's career, it became very, very difficult for him to compete, for a championship.
Bob, there's no question, Don. I think his recruiting wasn't as sharp and crisp, and his staff was not the same. He had that wonderful staff that was around him forever. I think the transition to the next coach, that's difficult for everybody. We saw that at West Virginia this past summer. Transitioning to a new coach while the other coach is there. That I don't think that will ever work. And
Right.
and so the program was just not, and the high standards that Florida State had for decades, Don. They were doing things that no college teams were doing with their ongoing success, and so it was awfully hard to maintain that anyway. I don't care who the coach is, and so that was another issue as well. But long story short, Bobby would be coaching till he was 90 if they let him, and nobody's going to hire an 82-year-old coach, but he's having a good time. He's enjoying his speaking life, and every time I've spoken to Bobby, he's in good spirits. He called me after this book came out. He said, "I'm really enjoying this book." He said, "You flatter me." And then he said, "I'd like to buy 21 copies for my grandchildren."
Well,
there you go.
Doug got a little bit of a jump on me because he had a copy of the book and I didn't, but I look forward to reading it, and I know that you're going to put Bobby Bowden in the best light possible. So, Pat, I thank you so much as always when you come on with us and talk about any topic, and when the basketball thing gets squared away, we'll do that as well.
Great to talk to you, Don. Thanks, Doug. Call anytime.
Thanks, Pat. Appreciate you joining us.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
very much.